Welcome back to the nationally syndicated Price of Business Show. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Always love having you on the program. One of my favorite guests, in fact, General Jeffrey Schloesser, retired Army general, incredible experience, and really a thought leader in several areas. Particularly one of them is in leadership, which he has a phenomenal book on that topic. Before we get started, General, love to having you back. Tell us about your book. Your book is so important, and it's important for people regardless of what they do professionally.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me back on the show. So Marathon War, Leadership in Combat in Afghanistan, talks to my experience leading 30,000 troops in 2008 and 2009 during really the highest parts of the Afghanistan war. It's all about leadership, as you said. Whether it's leadership in a pandemic, whether it's leadership right now in Ukraine or elsewhere, what you're seeing is the need for the ability to manage chaos in a way that makes sense for everybody that has to actually do the things that leaders want to do. So that's what the book's about. I really encourage people to see it. It's jeffschloesser.com. It's jeffschloesser.com. I'll help you get it on Amazon.
All right, very good. I encourage people to get it. It's really must reading. All right, let's talk about the war. You mentioned it, and it seems like that's been the dominant conversation for really, it seems like about 8 months, even before the war began, because tensions were so hot and high. Let's kind of get an update on what's going on with the war. It's not dominating the headlines like it was when the Ukrainians seemed to be winning, seemed to really be dominating at times. Right. And I think some of that is because anything gets old eventually, kind of loses its charm. I think part of it is the fact that the stories aren't as positive as I think listeners and viewers and readers would like to see. I think part of that is that people kind of beginning to feel like they have their own daily existential crises. Certainly nothing like the Ukrainians have, but they are distracted by things like inflation.
Yeah, I just think that you're absolutely right, Kevin. Inflation, whether it's, trying to deal with life here in the United States and Europe or whatever, but just the sheer impact, partly of those war, by the way, is just wearing people out. And, there's only so much you can write about missile attacks and civilians being killed before it just becomes, some of the background noise. And so it's unfortunate, because it is, the devastation continues in Ukraine, and it's real significant. And what I would say is that this is going to be a long slog, and from time to time, I think we're going to have to get the American public to be aware of what's going on, so that they can continue to either provide support, to the Ukrainians, or do what they want to do as far as impacting their elected officials.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the things that has always caught my interest, someone I really respected, was former Secretary of Defense who worked on both Democrat and Republican administration, Robert Gates. He has said in more than one interview, I've never seen a time where Joe Biden was on the right side of a foreign policy issue. And he's not an ugly guy. Robert Gates is very soft-spoken. He's not a chest pounder. He can't be and work for both Republicans and Democrats like he has. And, we saw what happened and unfolded in Afghanistan, a mitigated disaster. You couldn't have planned it. You couldn't have made it worse even if you planned it almost. It was that bad. And, and during this entire time, he's been like a cheerleader, pushing, prodding, and trying to write off the popularity of the war, but at the same time, never providing enough of the resources at the appropriate time to really make a difference. And so I kind of look at this, and I just wonder if I'm Putin, and I'm a totalitarian. Yeah, I got to act, like I live in a pluralistic society, but that isn't reality. He can do things that a truly democratically elected person can't do. He's got to look at the situation and go, it's just a question of when, not if I win.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, one, I have all the time in the world for Bob Gates. Secretary Gates is on the cover of my book and wrote a great review of the book on the back cover. But let me just say that I have to say that what looks like we're doing right now is we're sort of matching. As something happens from the Russians in the Ukraine, then we tend to match it. So, everybody's focused now on the high mobility artillery rocket system, the HIMARS system, and we're trickling them in. The Ukrainians have asked for 100 systems. These are rocket systems that can shoot 52 miles, which is a long way for anybody that works inside the Army or anything like that. It's a long ways, it's a game changer if you have enough of them. The Ukrainians asked for 100. We have sent them 8. Rumor here in Washington is 4 more are en route, maybe another 4. So that's a trickle, right? And it kind of gets to your point, right, Kevin. I mean, if we want the war to actually end, if we actually want the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians, I mean defeat, beat them, take back that land in Ukraine, then we're going to have to do more. And it remains to be seen whether this administration is willing to do that.
Yeah, it really does remain to be seen. And it looks like, to me, that the Russians are getting settled in the eastern part of Ukraine. They're focusing. We're not seeing, I don't think, any more significant expansion beyond there today. It's like now we're making them a part of Russia for all practical purposes. Do you think that this provides an opportunity for the Ukrainians to regroup and try to get some of that back? I just don't see them saying, "Okay, you win, you get that part." Do you see this as a temporary, maybe siege, and maybe there's not even a siege, but that's kind of like what it's looking, from the media, like the Russians are really just trying to really plant what they got rather than keep expanding, or is this just going to just continue to expand? What is your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, Kevin, first what you're going to see is this eastern region and the southern region, it's called the Donbass, Luhansk, and then also Kherson region. There's been Russian, separatists in those areas for some time. Since 2014, the Ukrainians have actually been fighting them. Well, you're going to see that they're going to become breakaway republics. They already have Russian-installed ministers, Russian-installed governors, and things of that nature. Banking systems are switching over to the Russians. They will become separate areas. Putin will declare them, or they'll declare themselves, through these rigged polls and rigged elections. They'll declare themselves separate. The big question that you're asking, though, is what happens beyond that? Will the Ukrainians fight to get them back? I think they will. Will they be successful? It's really, really hard to tell right now, and it gets back to that original question. Is the U.S. and NATO willing to supply the weapons of war so that the Ukrainians can actually fight them back and take back this territory? Really hard to tell at this point in time whether that's actually going to happen. I don't think Putin's going to give up. I don't think Putin will be satisfied with just those areas. I think he senses that we're weak. I mean, you look at the sanctions. The impact on the sanctions have been harder in NATO and the EU and the United States than they actually have been in Russia, at least right now. I mean, that'll tell us something.
Well, they're harder because, I hate to say it, I sound, anti-West here. They're harder because we're less resilient, I think, than the Russians. And it's not that the Russians are naturally more resilient than us. They don't have a whole lot of choice when they're under a dictator.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I mean, we're used to having warm homes. We're used to having good food. We're used to having, gas for automobiles and things of that nature. And the Russians, have gone without when they're basically told to do so. So I'm not saying they're stronger people, but they're used to doing with less. I do think that this has caused pretty much an impact on their middle class. I can't speak to the oligarchs, the rich folks. I think they've just moved other places. But I think the middle class has seen an impact in their lives. The question of it is they can't vote him out. They can't get rid of Putin that way. And my belief is he's done such a good job of eliminated anybody that would be opposition to him that he can basically run the country the way he sees fit. And that's what you're seeing. I want to add one thing. If you're in Europe right now and you're close to the Russian border or the Ukraine, or let's say the Baltics or Poland, you are very worried. You're worried, maybe beyond what may seem rational. You're worried that the Russians are going to come for you sometime, come for your country. And so this is going to be fascinating to watch over the next several months as this plays out. I don't think it's going to end this summer. I don't think it will be end this fall. It's going to continue to go for a while to go.
And meanwhile, if Ukraine doesn't keep contending for lost territory, the Russians have every incentive in the world to expand, don't they?
Oh, they absolutely do. Like I said, I think that they will try to, they will declare separate republics in the areas that they've taken on over the next few months. And then why not move on? They want Odessa, that port in the south on the Black Sea. They want that port more than almost anything else. And I think you'll see them, starting to try to move that way. It's quite a ways from where they currently are. They have to move west along, the Black Sea, northern part of the Black Sea. But you'll see them attack it. You'll see them attack. We just saw a recent attack with the cruise missiles into Odessa. So you'll see that continue.
Yeah, very interesting. What do you think? In terms of, I'm assuming that Zelensky almost feels like a broken record at this point. It's the same song. We don't see him nearly as often on because he has the same statements. The entire media thread of this company, of this country, has been sucked up by, and I'm sure it's the same in Western Europe from everything I read, which is quite a bit, frankly. This is a global issue. It's not just a U.S. issue. Same thing. There's really no room for the poor people of Ukraine because we've got the poor people of the United States and Europe. And so it's got to be really taxing, and it must be very ironic. It must be something that puts a smile, frankly, on Putin's face to know that the actions that the West is taking to try to cripple them, which again is really hard when you're trying to cripple a totalitarian regime, which can, at least in the short term, get out of its people that a democratic one cannot, that those tactics have actually hurt us more than them.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think, as I said, in the short term, that it looks like the economic sanctions have basically hurt the West, NATO, EU, United States, and other countries, worse than it's actually hurt the Russians. I'm sure that's short-sighted. I think the long-term impact of these sanctions may be pretty dramatic in Russia. But right now, I mean, they've controlled the inflation rate. They've controlled the fall of the ruble. They are establishing good trading partners for their, oil and gas, and they continue to hold the EU basically at bay as far as if they shut off all the gas right now, the EU will freeze this winter. I mean, that's just the way it is, and yet you're seeing them play here now, not only with the Chinese, but also with the Iranians, with Turkey. Establishing new links. You'll probably start to see semiconductor chips start to flow back into Russia. Putin is this guy is a KGB operative at heart, and he's a smart cookie as far as that goes. We may hate him, but he is smart. He's nefarious, but he is smart, and you're seeing him play us.
Got about a minute left. Final thoughts as we wrap it up.
Well, I just, I encourage all the listeners and stuff like that from every now and then check in on what's happening in Ukraine, because we have a lot of allies around the world, a lot of friends around the world in Europe, and to them, this is existential. They're seeing it play on their front doorstep, and they're not, 4,000 miles away like we are, and they are deeply concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, I can't talk today. That's really bad when you're in the radio business. General Jeffrey Schloesser, always love having you on the program, retired Army general. Always enjoy our time and look forward to our next chat. I'll be back right after this message.